Hi everybody, it's Paul here and I'm here to talk to you today about hedging, what hedging is and why it's so important in academic writing. Basically, you can't make a categorical statement without having categorical evidence. And hedging is a way of protecting yourself and making sure that you leave room for variance in your statements. For example, I can't say something like, mobile phones cause brain cancer, unless I have categorical evidence to back up that categorical statement. So I can say something like, people believe mobile phones may be linked to brain cancer, for example. That way, that gives me some variance in my statement and doesn't make an outlandish categorical statement that I can't prove. So today I'm just going to show you some techniques to include hedging in your writing. Lecturers, professors alike will definitely look for hedging in academic writing and will definitely comment when hedging should have been used and when categorical statements should not have been made. So hopefully this video can help you all get better marks in the future in your current course or even future courses down the road. So let's begin. So to see what hedging is, it's a technique to avoid making statements that can be contradicted easily. For example, that mobile phones cause brain cancer. There's actually no correlating evidence to state that, although a lot of people do believe it. So it's very easy to disprove someone saying that. So if you wanted to include a statement like that in your essay, you'd need to include some hedging. All right, let's have a look. We have some examples here of some categorical statements that could be made. First one is demand for healthcare exceeds supply. That's possibly true many times, but we can't say it's true all the time without having that evidence that categorically backs that up. So we would need to hedge something like that. Students find writing exam essays difficult. Again, we can't make a statement that's 100% always like that because we don't have the evidence that students always find exam essays difficult. Of course, there are quite possibly lots of students that don't find them difficult. Fertility rates fall as societies get richer. This is a correlation that does exist, but again, we don't have the categorical evidence to say this one equals this one causes this one. We can say 1 + 1 = 2, but we can't say lower fertility rates, richer societies equals lower fertility rates. So we need to use our technique of hedging so that we don't get ourselves in trouble. For example, the first one, demand for healthcare exceeds supply. We could say demand for healthcare usually exceeds supply. Now this usually, it's not complete hedging because it still has some definition to it, and I'm going to show you what that means soon. As an adverb of frequency, there is we still need to be careful with what kind of adverb of frequency we use. I'm going to show you what I mean by that soon. The second one, students find writing exam essays difficult. We can hedge that with students may find writing exam essays difficult. And that gives us a lot more variance to our statement. And we're no longer making a strong categorical statement that students always find exam essays difficult. And the third one, fertility rates fall as societies get richer. Fertility rates tend to fall as societies get richer. This one's using a verb. The previous one's using a modal verb, things like may, might, things like that. But fertility rates fall as societies get richer. Fertility rates tend to fall as societies get richer. This is much more accurate. And though there is some correlating evidence that suggests this, as a country develops, its fertility rates drop. There's definitely no evidence to say it is always the case. 1 + 1 = 2. So we need to make our statement safe there by using a verb such as tend to. It's always a useful verb to use in this case. So if we try changing these ones, we've got crime is linked to poor education. So again, a categorical statement. Crime is linked to poor education. There is probably a lot of different factors, a lot of different causes for crime. We can't simply say that poor education is the only crime. And also we can't say that everyone who got a poor education became a criminal because it's just not true. So instead of saying such a categorical statement as crime is linked to poor education, we can use hedging in our essay writing to make it more safe and more room for variance. And again, we've got our modal verbs, our adverbs of frequency, and our verbs. So I'm just going to show you how to use those three in this one example to create hedging. First one, crime may be linked to poor education. So there we're using a modal verb. It could be might, could be may, could be any of those. Number two, adverbs of frequency. Crime is frequently linked to poor education. Now again, as I said earlier, you've got to be careful with adverbs of frequency. They don't strictly hedge as in it's a non-defining word, and I'll show you what I mean by that soon. And then finally, crime tends to be linked to poor education, which is the one we learned earlier. Verbs can be very useful. Now, the adverb of frequency, what I was talking about earlier, is that not all adverbs of frequency are non-definable words, such as things like tend to. When I use the verb tend to, it doesn't give me any meaning. Tend to could mean something for somebody and something completely different for somebody else. Whereas adverbs of frequency can have some meaning in their name, so we have to be careful. If you look at the chart here, you can see that always and never are absolutes in adverbs of frequency. Therefore, they can't be used in hedging because always means 100% of the time and never means 0% of the time. So they're actually not being used for hedging at all. In the middle, we have sometimes, which is 50% of the time. So when I say something like before, crime is frequently linked to poor education, what I'm saying is that crime, more times than not, more than 50% of the time anyway, the majority of the time, crime is linked to poor education. So as you can see, we're not strictly saying it's, it could be, it might be, it may be, that sort of thing. We're saying that the more times than not, more often than not, and the majority of the time, crime is linked to poor education in that statement. So you still need to be careful, and you still need to make sure you have the evidence to back such a statement up. And on the other end of the spectrum, of course, if I said crime is seldom linked to poor education, that means I'm saying less than 50% of the time, I have evidence to back up that less than 50% of the time, crime is linked to poor education. There are other factors that are more common, is what I'm saying in that statement. So again, you must have the evidence to be able to back such a statement up. Modal verbs that we can use, things like might, could, and can. These are common modal verbs to use in hedging. And some great verbs you can use: appears to be, suggests, believes, thinks, perhaps, it seems, it looks like, and assumes, and it's possibly in that case. Okay, you can also use modifiers such as fairly, rather, and quite. You could try changing these sentences using the modifier. Instead of the company's efforts to save energy were successful, we can use the modifier fairly to change that to the company's efforts to save energy were fairly successful. The survey was a comprehensive study of student opinion. The survey was a rather comprehensive study of student opinion. Okay, and then lastly, his second book had a hostile reception. His second book had quite a hostile reception. Okay, so we can change that with modifiers as well to give it that hedging, so we're not making such a categorical, outlandish statement. I hope you enjoyed that lesson on hedging, and I hope you are able to use that in your academic writing to keep your statements safe and not have to include categorical evidence every time you write. It is very useful, and like I said earlier, professors and lecturers now and in the future will definitely pick you up on it if you're not using hedging correctly, and that will definitely affect your final grade in your essays. If you have any questions though, I'm always in my office behind reception if I'm not in class. You can drop in and see me, or you can just make a booking through reception itself. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.